She remembered him as the poor boy with kind eyes. The one she left behind when life offered her something shinier, something easier. Now, 40 years later, he walks into her office. No longer the boy she once pitied, but the man she must answer to. Some stories begin in youth. But the most powerful ones begin again, when you least expect them to. In every town, there are stories that linger in the air like the scent of rain on old wood. Stories of choices made, hearts broken, and time, always time, waiting in the wings to surprise us. This is the story of Grace and Thomas. And it begins with a goodbye. A quiet afternoon at Miller's Diner. Late summer 1983. Grace, 22, smartly dressed in a pale yellow dress, sits across from Thomas, 25, a lanky man in a worn shirt with calloused hands and nervous eyes. His coffee sits untouched. Thomas softly. Grace, I know I don't have much, but I've been saving. I got a job at the auto shop. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. And I love you. Grace sighs and looks out the window. Grace gently. Tommy, you've got a good heart. But I can't build a life on promises. My father's already upset I've been seeing you. He's expecting me to marry someone. Someone who can take care of me. Thomas swallows, his voice cracking. Miss, I'd spend my whole life trying to give you everything. Grace pausing. And that's what scares me. You deserve someone who loves you without fear. She stands slowly, places a $5 bill on the table, and walks away. Thomas doesn't follow her. He watches her silhouette disappear down Main Street, and the bell above the diner door jingles like a punctuation mark on the end of his heart. She walked away, believing she was choosing security. He stayed, rooted in love and pain, learning that some hearts grow strongest when broken. They didn't speak again for 40 years. Until fate gave them one last page to turn. Grace, now in her early 60s, gracefully steps off the elevator. Her silver hair is pinned up neatly, her suit tailored. She carries herself with quiet dignity, a woman who's weathered life, loss, and pride. She's been with the company 18 years, rising from receptionist to department lead. Few co-workers whisper nearby. One murmurs. Coworker. Did you hear? The company's been acquired. Some private investor. Big shake-up coming. Grace sighs. She's been through changes before. She reaches her office. A modest corner desk with pictures of her grown daughter and a small vase of lilies. Her phone rings. Receptionist, voice trembling. Grace. The new owner wants to meet with you. Top floor. Grace hesitates. Of course, she replies, masking her nerves. It's modern, minimal. A large window overlooks the city. A man stands with his back turned, hands in his pockets. Man calmly. Come in, please. Grace steps forward. Grace. I'm Grace Elliott. You asked to see me. The man turns around slowly. Asterisk Thomas. Older now. Distinguished. Same eyes. But behind them, time, ache, and something softer. Thomas gently. It's been a long time. Grace. Grace's breath catches. Her knees almost buckle. Grace whispers. Tommy. Thomas nodding. Yes. Though these days, it's Mr. Whitaker to most. He smiles faintly. 40 years had passed. But some faces, they wait for you. Even if you tried to forget. Flashback. Small-town garage, 1985. Thomas wipes grease from his hands, watching cars pass on the road. A letter from a business school lies unopened in his coat pocket. Young Thomas, to himself. You'll see, Grace. One day. Back to present. Grace sits across from him, struggling to find words. Grace. You own the company. Miss. I built it from the ground up. Started with auto parts, then logistics. Now, well, here we are. Pauses. Thomas calmly. And you, department head. You built a good life too. Grace swallows. Her eyes shimmer. Grace. Not always. I married a man my father approved of. He died 10 years in. It wasn't a happy marriage. Thomas softly. I'm sorry. They sit in silence. The years hang between them. They spoke like two souls who'd once danced, and now stood in the stillness after the music ended. But there was still more to be said. And time this time was willing. Grace sits at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand. Her daughter Elaine video calls in. Elaine. Mom, are you okay? You look like you saw a ghost. Grace, smiling faintly. I might have. Do you remember me telling you about Thomas Whitaker? The boy I used to know. Elaine, wide-eyed. You mean the one you? Grace. Yes. He's my new boss. Elaine. Whoa. Grace. Yeah. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It comes back not to haunt us, but to give us another chance. Grace wasn't sure what that chance was yet. But she knew this. Her heart, after all these years, wasn't finished speaking. Some mornings arrive like a letter you forgot to open. Quiet. Weighted. And full of memories you thought you'd outgrown. Grace stands by the window, looking down at the city street below. She cradles her teacup, lost in thought. Grace, softly to herself. 40 years. And he remembers. She sets the cup down and walks to her side table. Inside the drawer, a small, faded photo. Thomas, younger, laughing beside his old pickup truck. She had kept it all this time, tucked away like a pressed flower between chapters of a book she never finished. Grace walks into the office. The hallway feels unfamiliar now, though nothing has changed. Except everything has. She reaches her desk. A small envelope sits waiting, no name, just her title printed in silver ink. Inside is a note. Lunch today. My treat. Tea. She stares at the handwriting for a moment. It hasn't changed much. Strong. Neat. Measured. The two sit across from each other. It's not the diner from their past, but there's a similar stillness. No rush. No music. Just the clinking of cutlery and the hum of old stories waiting to be told. Miss. You still take 2 sugars in your tea. Grace, surprised. You remember that. Thomas, smiling. I remember everything. Grace, carefully. I didn't expect to see you again. Ever. And certainly not like this. Thomas, nodding. Neither did I. Life has a strange sense of humor. They share a soft laugh, the kind that covers an ache. Flashback. 1987. Thomas's small apartment. He sits at a desk covered in blueprints. A rotary phone beside him. A half-written letter addressed to Grace Elliott. He never sends it. He never wrote again. And she never asked. 2 hearts quietly drifting, each believing the other had moved on. Back to present. Cafe conversation. Grace, gently. Why did you want to see me again? Miss. I didn't at first. When I bought the company, I didn't know you worked here. But when I saw your name. Grace. You almost walked away. Miss. I almost walked back in time. He stirs his coffee, then looks up. His eyes suddenly vulnerable. Thomas, softly. Truth is, Grace. I never stopped wondering. What if you'd said yes that day in the diner? Grace doesn't answer immediately. She reaches for her tea. Grace. I've asked myself that too, more times than I'd admit. Especially when life got hard. She hesitates. Grace whispers. But I was scared. Not of you. But of choosing love over safety. And I lost both. She returns to her desk. On her computer screen, an old newsletter from the company's early days. There's a photograph. Thomas, 10 years younger, standing with his team. She hadn't noticed it before. In the picture, he's holding a plaque. Visionary of the Year. Thomas Whitaker, 2009. She touches the screen gently. Time teaches us that strength is not in the fortune we build, but in the hearts we leave open, even after they've been closed for years. Elaine enters, setting down a pie she's brought. Elaine. I still say you should have married that Thomas guy. Grace chuckles. Grace. You were 7 when I told you that story. Elaine, teasing. Even at 7, I had better sense than you. They laugh together. Elaine. Seriously, Mom. He sounds like a good man. You ever think maybe this happened for a reason? Grace's smile fades gently. Grace. All the time. Thomas sits at his desk, an old dog-eared photo in hand. Grace at the diner laughing mid-bite from a day long gone. He tucks the photo back into his wallet, places it in his desk drawer and sighs. They had lived lifetimes apart, raised children, lost spouses, worked late, prayed early, and somewhere the story still whispered, unfinished. Thomas and Grace stroll slowly through a local park. The leaves are turning. The air smells of memory. Miss, I'm not asking for anything. I just want to know you again, even if it's just as friends. Grace quietly. I'd like that. They pause by a bench. Miss, funny thing about time. We think it heals. But maybe it just gives us space to remember what mattered most. Grace, smiling gently. Or who? They sit in silence. Two people. Two lives. Reaching across the years with words they couldn't say before. There's a stillness in moments like these, where regret meets grace, and silence finally gives way to healing. She opens a box from under her bed. Inside a few keepsakes. Letters. Photos. One envelope never opened. Her father's handwriting. She opens it now. Grace, if Thomas ever comes back into your life, I hope you'll listen to your heart instead of mine. I was wrong to interfere. He was the best man to ever sit at our table. Grace's hand trembles. A tear falls onto the letter. Sometimes the past doesn't close its door. It waits patiently for us to knock. There are letters that find us when we're ready, not when they're written. Words left behind can sometimes carry the apologies our loved ones never found the courage to speak aloud. Grace sits quietly, rereading the note from her father. Her thumb runs over the fading ink as if touching his voice. Her lips quiver in a small private smile. Grace softly. You always were so stubborn, Daddy. But so was I. She folds the letter and places it gently in a keepsake box. Her gaze drifts to the phone. For a moment she considers dialing. Then she picks up her purse. Grace rides up alone. The elevator hums softly. She watches the numbers blink past. We don't always know when a simple workday will bring an unexpected turn. But the heart, especially the older heart, learns to sense when something is about to change. The elevator dings. She steps out. She finds a handwritten note waiting for her. There's something I want to show you. If you're willing. Conference room B, noon. She pauses, reading it twice. She places it gently in her drawer and smooths her blouse. The room is quiet. On the table, a large manila folder. Thomas stands by the window, hands folded behind his back. Grace enters. Grace, you're quite the fan of surprises. Thomas, smiling. I prefer to call it delayed conversations. He gestures toward the folder. Miss, go ahead. She opens it. Inside, an old sketch of a home. A modest ranch-style house with a wraparound porch. Familiar. Her hand goes to her mouth. Grace whispers. That's my childhood home. Miss, I kept that drawing all these years. I made it after the last time I saw you. Built it in my mind 100 times. Not for a business plan, but for a dream. He pauses, then adds. Miss, I used to imagine us sitting on that porch. Rocking chairs. Laughter. Grace lowers her eyes, the weight of regret and wonder in her expression. Some dreams stay folded in the corners of our memory. Others get carried, sketch by sketch, through a lifetime of waiting. Thomas and Grace walk slowly, watching the sun dip behind the buildings. Miss, I was angry for a long time, Grace. Not at you. At the idea of us never happening. Grace, I was angry too. Myself. For not choosing love. For choosing what looked good on paper. They sit on a bench. Grace, I lost that house 2 years after my husband passed. He left debts I didn't know about. I moved into a 1-bedroom and never looked back. Thomas softly. I'm sorry. Grace, don't be. Humbled me, made me softer, taught me to stop measuring happiness by square footage. Flashback, 1993. Grace at her husband's funeral. She stands in black, surrounded by well-dressed strangers. Her daughter clutches her hand. A neighbor whispers about the debt. Grace's eyes are dry, but her heart is breaking, not just from grief, but from the realization that she never truly felt at home in her marriage. We mourn not only the people we lose, but sometimes the pieces of ourselves we never gave a chance to live. He pulls a small wooden box from his closet. Inside a letter, addressed to Grace, should we ever meet again. He never mailed it. He opens it now and reads it aloud softly. Thomas reading. Grace, if you're reading this, then time has given us a second chance. I want you to know I never stopped loving you. Not because I held on to the past, but because the past held on to me. I don't know where life has taken you, but I hope you found joy. And if not, maybe we still can. He exhales and folds the letter. Grace slips into a wooden pew near the back. It's a small service. Quiet hymns. Familiar faces. Thomas arrives late and sits beside her. No words, just a nod. They sit through the service in silence, hands resting inches apart. Afterward, outside the chapel, Grace smiling. Didn't expect to see you here. Miss. Didn't expect to come. But something nudged me. Grace teasing. Well, heaven has better seating than your office. They laugh. Forgiveness doesn't always come with loud declarations. Sometimes it arrives in the quietness of shared spaces, and the warmth of simply showing up. She pulls out her journal, writes carefully, thoughtfully. Today I let go of guilt, of the what-ifs, of the shame I carried for choosing comfort over courage. I think Thomas has forgiven me. The harder question is, can I forgive myself? She closes the journal and looks out the window. The phone rings. It's Thomas. Thomas on speaker. Feel like a walk by the lake tomorrow. Grace smiling. I'd like that. The heart doesn't grow old. Grows wiser. And sometimes when the years have softened its sharpest corners, it beats louder than ever before. On Grace's desk, a new photo appears. Her and Thomas sitting on a park bench, smiling under autumn trees. Beside it, a sticky note written in his handwriting. Not too late. Not anymore. As we age, we come to understand that healing doesn't always demand grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in the form of a shared walk, and a silence that no longer feels empty. Thomas and Grace walk slowly by the lake. Ducks paddle in the distance. The sunlight rests gently on the water like a memory not yet faded. Thomas, after a long pause. You always loved the water. Grace smiling. I used to come here with my daughter. We'd feed the ducks. Talk about everything and nothing. Miss. It suits you, the quiet, the reflection. They walk a few more steps before Grace speaks again. Grace quietly. Thomas. When you said you never stopped wondering, did that include being angry with me? He stops walking and looks at her. Thoughtfully. Miss. I was angry. Not at you, at the timing. Myself too. For not being enough. For not fighting harder. Grace. You were enough. I didn't think I was. They sit on a wooden bench beneath an old willow tree. Flashback. 1981. Grace's bedroom. She's 38, standing in front of a mirror in a silk dress. Her hand hovers over a note on her dresser. It's from Thomas, asking her to leave with him. She stares at the mirror for a long time. She doesn't go. Back then, she believed love should come with certainty. And Thomas came with questions, beautiful open-ended ones she was too afraid to answer. Back to present lakeside. Grace softly. I think I loved you then. Truly. But I didn't trust that love could carry me through the unknown. Miss. Do you trust it now? She looks at him, a half-smile forming. Grace. I think. I'd like to try. They sit in silence, watching the water ripple as the wind passes gently through the trees. Grace pours 2 cups of tea. Elaine, her daughter, is visiting again. Elaine, curious. You seem different lately. Softer. Happier. Grace, smiling. I've been spending time with someone. An old friend. Elaine raises an eyebrow. Elaine. The Thomas. Grace nods. The very same. Elaine, half laughing. Well, it's about time. I always hoped you two would find your way back. Grace sets down the teacups. Grace. We're taking it slow. Like two people learning a new language, but realizing they already know the words. Thomas is alone, going through old employee files. He pulls out Grace's folder. There's a sticky note she wrote years ago. Great things take time, let's be patient. Smiles. Sometimes words we write without thinking come back to us as lifelines, when we least expect it. Thomas invites Grace to a charity event his company sponsors. A reading program for seniors and children. Grace, delighted. I've always loved reading stories aloud. Miss. Then come read one. She hesitates at first, nervous. Then steps up in front of the small group. Grace reading. Once upon a time, there lived a woman who thought she had missed her chance, until life whispered, "You're right on time." The children smile. The seniors nod. Thomas watches her, eyes full of something unspoken. Second chances don't always come loudly. Sometimes they arrive in the smallest of moments, the courage to show up, the kindness to stay, the love to try again. Thomas arrives holding a small bouquet of yellow tulips. Miss. Your favorite. You mentioned them once. Decades ago. Grace, gently. You remembered. Miss. I've forgotten many things, Grace. But never what made you smile. She invites him in. They sit by her window, listening to the soft hum of an old radio. Grace. I wish we had more time. Thomas, looking at her. Grace, we do. Time is just a story we tell ourselves. We're still writing ours. She reaches out and takes his hand. Grace. Then let's make it a good chapter. When the heart reopens, even after years of silence, love knows how to speak. Not with fireworks, but with familiarity. He sits at his desk and begins to write a letter. Not typed, handwritten. Dear Grace, if I could go back to that moment in the diner and ask you again, I wouldn't change a word. But this time I'd wait longer. I'd wait a lifetime if that's what it took. You're still. Thomas. He folds it, places it in an envelope, and sets it on the table. He doesn't plan to send it. He just needed to write it. Closure doesn't always require an audience. Sometimes it only asks for honesty and ink. They return to their spot beneath the willow tree. The same place where hope bloomed just days ago. Miss. There's a bench like this in my hometown. I used to sit there and wonder if you ever thought of me. Grace, softly. I did. Most often when I was sitting alone. Wishing someone had stayed. He takes her hand. Miss. I'm here now. They sit in the golden quiet. Sometimes, love isn't about rewriting the beginning. It's about being brave enough to write the ending together. Some words remain unsent not because they were untrue, but because the heart didn't yet know how to say them. Grace opens the envelope. Inside is a letter she wrote to Thomas many years ago, the night after she told him she was marrying someone else. Grace, reading aloud. Dear Thomas, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I couldn't say it to your face. I thought choosing security meant I was being wise. But now that you've walked away, I feel like I've traded warmth for walls. Please don't hate me. I'll always remember how you looked at me like I was a sunrise. Love. Grace. She folds the letter, her eyes glassy with memory. Grace walks in, and Thomas is already there, stirring coffee. Their eyes meet with a quiet fondness. Thomas lightly teasing. Morning, Grace. You sleep all right, or were you writing more unsent love letters? Grace chuckles. Grace. Funny you should say that. She hesitates. Grace. I found one last night. From a long time ago. Never mailed it. I wanted to explain back then. But I was afraid the truth would hurt you more. Miss. And now. Grace, gently. Now I believe truth heals more than silence ever could. Healing at any age begins when we let the past breathe and forgive ourselves for the versions we once were. Thomas takes Grace to his favorite cafe. Small, family-owned, tucked between old buildings. The owner greets him like an old friend. Cafe owner smiling. "Back with your lady friend, Mr. Hartley?" Thomas nods, beaming. "Miss. She's the one I told you about. The one I waited on." Grace blushing. "I suppose I'm famous here now." They sit by the window. Rain trickles down the glass. "Miss. I used to come here and imagine you across from me. I'd order 2 teas. Drink both." Grace softly. "I used to make tea for one. And pour the second cup anyway. Just in case." They both smile, shy and full of something tender. Flashback. Early 2000s. Grace in her kitchen. Middle-aged Grace sets 2 teacups on the table. Only one is filled. She stares at the empty one. And sighs. Even in solitude, love leaves room for someone to return. They walk through her modest backyard. Overgrown roses, an old swing, fading stepping stones. Thomas kneels by a rosebush and gently begins pruning. "Miss. Still got a little life in them." Grace. "I stopped tending the garden after my husband passed. Just didn't see the point. Miss. Maybe now's the time to replant." Grace quietly. "Maybe it is." They work side by side. Laughter. Dirt under the nails. Feels natural. A formal dinner is held by the company. Grace wears a deep blue dress, understated and elegant. Thomas wears a dark suit and a soft, nervous smile. Sometimes, even the most familiar love feels brand new, when shared in the light of the present, instead of the shadows of the past. At the event, Thomas is awarded for his decades of leadership. Event host on stage. And the heart of this company, Mr. Thomas Hartley. A man who built success not from profit, but from patience. Applause. Thomas takes the mic. "Miss. I've learned a lot in this building. But the greatest lesson didn't come from a spreadsheet. It came from someone who once told me I had potential, even when I had little else." He glances at Grace. "Miss. Grace, thank you. For believing in me before I even knew how to believe in myself." Grace's eyes fill, quietly. They step outside. Soft music plays inside, but out here it's quiet. Grace. "That speech. I didn't expect that. Miss. You inspired more of my life than you'll ever know." He reaches into his jacket, pulls out something wrapped in tissue. He places it in her hand. Grace opening it. A delicate silver bracelet. Inside engraved. "Still time. Miss. It's never too late. Not for forgiveness. Not for love." She looks at him. Not the man she rejected, but the man she has rediscovered. There is something powerful in choosing the same person twice. Not because you have to, but because this time your heart is ready. They sip coffee. No words needed. Just rocking chairs creaking, the sun rising slowly. Grace. "What now, Thomas?" "Miss. Now. We live. We walk. Talk. We plant roses. Maybe we grow old. Together this time." She reaches over and rests her hand on his. Grace. "I like the sound of that." The greatest love stories are not the ones that start fast and burn bright, but the ones that survive the quiet and return home. The sun is setting. A soft golden light fills the room. Grace opens an old wooden chest, lifting out a small record player and a dusty stack of vinyl records. She gently places one on the turntable. Music holds memory in its notes. Even after decades, one song can bring back a heartbeat long forgotten. A slow melody begins. A tune from 1979, one they once danced to in a small diner parking lot, under flickering lights. Thomas walking in. "Is that Ella Fitzgerald?" Grace smiling. "You remembered." "Miss. I remember everything about that night. Especially how you danced barefoot on the pavement." Grace. "I never thought I'd dance again." "Not really." She stands and offers her hand. Grace softly. But I'd like to now. With you. They dance slowly. No one's watching. The music crackles slightly, but the rhythm is steady, like their hearts finally in step. Flashback. 1979. Parking lot behind old diner. Young Grace twirls barefoot as Thomas claps along. The distant hum of traffic, the buzz of the radio, the laughter of two people who hadn't yet broken each other's hearts. Young Grace teasing. You're not much of a dancer. Young Thomas. No. But I'm trying. For you. Back to present. Thomas as they sway. I think I've improved. Grace, resting her head on his chest. No, Thomas, you were always just right. Thomas surprises Grace with a visit to an old bookstore, one she loved in her youth. It's now quieter, slower, but still smells of ink and time. He hands her a small, wrapped package. Inside, a first edition of a novel she once lent him in the ATS, and never got back. Grace in awe. You found it. Miss. Held on to it for 40 years. Figured someday I'd return it. Along with a proper apology. They sit in the back corner of the shop, flipping through the pages. Grace. I forgot how it ended. Miss. Two people go separate ways. But then, after losing so much, they find their way back to each other. Grace whispers. Sounds familiar. Sometimes the greatest stories aren't written in books. They're lived, painfully, beautifully, by people brave enough to turn the page. A retirement notice is being announced. Grace's name is on it. The room applauds politely. But Thomas, he's quiet. Later in his office. Thomas hesitant. You didn't tell me. Grace. I've been thinking about it for a while. I've spent so long working. I'd like to live now. Really live. Thomas quietly. And what does that look like? He smiles. Grace. Morning coffee on the porch. Gardening. Maybe travel. Maybe dinners with someone special. Miss. Grace. I don't want to miss another chapter. If you'll have me, I want to be in that life. She reaches across the desk and takes his hand. Grace. You're already in it. Grace plants a new rose bush. Thomas is beside her, sleeves rolled, dirt on his hands. They work quietly, like an old couple that's been doing this forever. Grace smiling. It's strange. I never thought retirement would feel like a beginning. Miss. Maybe it's not retirement. Just rewriting the story. When love returns later in life, it doesn't come crashing like a storm. It arrives like spring, soft, sure, full of promise. They take a small trip to the coast. A place Grace had never been, despite always dreaming of it. The ocean stretches before them, wide and steady. Miss. You know, I once planned to propose to you. Grace surprised. When? Miss. The week you left me. I had the ring and everything. Spent every dime I had. She looks at him, overwhelmed. Grace. Why didn't you tell me? Miss. Pride. Maybe fear too. He reaches into his jacket. From an inner pocket, he pulls out a small old box. He opens it. Inside, a simple, elegant ring. Slightly worn by time. Still beautiful. Grace, eyes filling. You kept it. Thomas softly. I kept you. She doesn't speak. Instead, she places her hand on his. Grace. We don't need promises now. Just presence. Just today. He nods. Miss. Then let's have every today we can. It's never too late to dance. To travel. To plan. To love again. What matters is not how much time you lost, but what you choose to do with what remains. They sit side by side, wrapped in a shared blanket. The wind rustles the trees. A soft light glows from inside the house. Grace. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had said yes? All those years ago? Miss. Every now and then. Grace. Would it have lasted? Miss. I don't know. But I know this. We were meant to find each other again. When we were ready. She smiles and rests her head on his shoulder. Grace. I'm glad we waited. Some dances begin late, after the music has changed. But when the right song plays, the heart always remembers the steps. Rain patters gently against the window. Thomas sits at the kitchen table, flipping through an old photo album while Grace prepares tea. There's something sacred about old photographs. They capture not only faces but feelings, the kind time cannot erase. Thomas, smiling. You still have this one. The picnic in '78. You had just burned the sandwiches. Grace, laughing. And you pretended they were delicious. Miss. They were. Because you made them. They share an easy laughter, the kind that only history makes comfortable. Grace brings 2 cups of tea. Her hands tremble slightly. Thomas notices. Thomas, concerned. Grace, your hand. Grace shrugs. Just age, maybe a little arthritis. But something in her eyes suggests more. She changes the subject quickly. Scene, community library. Later that week, Thomas and Grace visit the local library to donate a collection of books. The librarian, a young woman in her 20s, smiles brightly. Librarian, you two are just the sweetest. Married long. Grace pauses, then smiles. Not yet. But we've loved each other longer than some marriages last. Thomas watches her with admiration and quiet gratitude. Grace sits at her vanity, brushing her silver-streaked hair. She opens a drawer and takes out a sealed envelope. On it, in her handwriting, to Thomas if I'm no longer here. She stares at it, then hides it back beneath her scarves. Some goodbyes are written in silence, not from fear, but from love that wants to leave gently. Grace sits across from her doctor. The mood is quiet. The doctor speaks softly. Doctor, the test confirms its early stage. But we must begin treatment soon. You have options, Grace. But time matters. Grace sits still, holding her handbag tightly. Doctor, compassionate. You don't have to go through this alone. Grace, softly. I've already gone through so much alone. But maybe not anymore. Grace and Thomas are planting tulip bulbs. A late fall breeze sways the trees. Grace, do you ever think about how strange life is? The way it circles back. Miss. Every single day. She wipes her brow, slightly out of breath. Thomas, watching her closely. You sure you're all right? Grace. I'm okay, Thomas. I'm just feeling the weight of years a bit more. He doesn't press. But he knows. Something in her is pulling inward. Grace lights a candle. She sits in the back pew. Alone. Her eyes brim with quiet emotion as the choir sings, Abide with me. Some visit churches not for answers, but to find peace with what they already know. Thomas opens the door to find Grace already inside, sitting on the couch, holding something in her lap. Grace. I let myself in. I hope that's okay. Miss. Always. She hands him a small velvet box. Not a ring but a locket. Grace. I've had this since I was 17. I want you to have it. He opens the locket. Inside, a faded photo of the two of them from decades ago, and a tiny pressed daisy. Grace. You picked it from the side of the road. Remember. Thomas choked. I thought you'd forgotten. Grace. I never did. I just hid it to survive. They sit silently, the weight of everything between them settling like soft dust. The lake is still. Trees reflected like a mirror. Birds glide overhead. Grace finally. Thomas. There's something I need to tell you. He stops walking. Turns to her, quiet. Grace slowly. I've been diagnosed. Early stage cancer. The treatment. It's going to be hard. Thomas's face tightens, eyes filling. Miss. You should have told me sooner. Grace tears. I wanted to give you joy, not burden. After all these years. Thomas steps forward. Grace. Love doesn't count cost. Carries weight. Let me carry this with you. They embrace. The kind that says I will not let go again. Real love does not flee at the sign of sorrow. Says. Shoulders. It walks the hard road together. Grace begins her treatment. Thomas is there at every appointment. He reads to her. holds her hand, tells her stories from his past, even the embarrassing ones. Thomas chuckling. I once burned water. Actual water. Trying to cook pasta. You would have teased me for years. Grace weak smile. I still might. They laugh. Her hair begins to thin. She wears scarves. Thomas makes soup. He organizes her medicine. Leaves notes on her mirror that say things like, you are still beautiful. Let's walk the garden again today. I love you more than yesterday. She saves each one in a little wooden box. Scene, winter evening. Fireplace lit. Thomas and Grace sit by the fire. Grace quietly. If I don't make it, I want you to know, Thomas. Thomas, interrupting. You're going to make it. Grace, gentle. But if I don't, know that you made the end of my life the most meaningful part. Thomas holds her hand tightly. Miss. No, this is not the end. It's the chapter before the next beginning. Love in the winter of life is not a fading thing. It burns brighter for having endured the cold. And it teaches us this. You are never too old to begin again. To forgive. To hope. To love. Sunlight filters through lace curtains. The tulips planted last fall bloom in soft reds and yellows. Grace sits by the window in a cozy sweater, sipping tea. Her scarf is gone. Her hair is short but growing back. Thomas enters with a grocery bag and a warm smile. Miss. The lady at the bakery said our usual cinnamon rolls were waiting. I told her you'd be by next week yourself. Grace, smiling. You're awfully optimistic. Miss. I'm just used to miracles. He kisses the top of her head. She closes her eyes. They sit in quiet peace. Some chapters don't end with fanfare. They close like a soft sigh, full of quiet gratitude. A retirement luncheon is held in Grace's honor, though she officially stepped down months ago. Former colleagues, now friends, offer toasts. Coworker raising glass. To Grace, who brought wisdom, dignity, and a sense of humor to every single day at work, and whose story reminds us all, life is full of second chances. Applause follows. Grace's eyes shimmer. Thomas takes the mic next. Miss. Most of you know me as her former boss. But truth is, I was just the man lucky enough to be given a second chance. Pauses. Thomas, emotion rising. I loved Grace when I had nothing. And now, having everything means nothing without her. She taught me to forgive the past. And live the present. They visit Grace's parents' graves. She places a flower and brushes her hand gently over the stone. Grace. I never told them about you. Not really. I always thought they'd be disappointed. Miss. In me. Grace. No, in me. For walking away from something so real. He wraps his arm around her shoulder. Grace. I think they'd be proud now. Thomas sets up an old 8mm projector. Home movies flicker on the wall. Their youth, old holidays, even footage of the parking lot dance from 1979. Grace watches, hand over her mouth. Grace whispers. I forgot how much of life we already lived together. Miss. And how much is still left. Grace stands and reads a passage at the front. Her voice is stronger now. Thomas beams from the front pew. After service, a child hands Grace a tulip. She kneels. Grace. For me. Child. You're pretty. Grace laughs gently. Grace. Well, aren't you a charmer? Grace walks into Thomas's office for the first time in months. Grace. I hated this room when I first came back here. Thomas, grinning. I remember. She touches the desk, remembering the distance that once lay between them. Grace. Now it just feels like where we began again. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without letting the hurt rule you. It is choosing peace again and again. Just a few friends. A white shawl. The sound of waves. Thomas and Grace stand barefoot in the sand, holding hands. Officiant. Some loves begin in youth. Others begin when the world slows down. What matters is not when love begins, but that it begins. Thomas. I've waited 40 years to say this. Grace, I love you. Fully, wholly, without condition or expectation. Grace vows. And I love you, Thomas. Not for what we lost, but for what we've found. A kiss. The crowd claps gently. Overhead, two seagulls soar together in the wind. They sit side by side in rocking chairs. A golden sky stretches beyond them. Miss. Ever wish we could go back to being 25? Grace. No. I'd rather be 70 with you. Miss. Me too. They hold hands. Quiet. Present. Complete. Time can steal many things. Youth, opportunities, even dreams. But it also gives wisdom, perspective, and second chances. Grace and Thomas lost each other once. But they gained something far richer. A love that endured. A forgiveness that healed. And a life that bloomed again, just when the world thought it was done. Love, my friends, doesn't care how old you are. It only asks that you're ready when it returns.